Hello everyone. Quick note before we dive in. The voice you're hearing is AI generated. I might pull my weight as a software developer, but my speaking skills suck. I hope that you understand. Today we're going to do a full walkthrough of Groovebox Advanced. This is a self-contained beat-making environment for VCV Rack. It's got a 64-step sequencer, up to 16 tracks, a mixer, an effects chain, a scripting system, all packed into a single module. If you've ever wanted to build full beats without sprawling across your entire VCV Rack patch, this is built for that. We're going to go through every major feature today, step by step. But for now, let's focus on understanding the overall instrument and how everything fits together. Let's start from scratch. I've just added Groovebox Advanced to an empty VCV Rack patch. To get it running, you only need to do two things. Connect a clock source to the clock input and connect output 1 and output 2 to your audio interface. That's it. You should hear a basic drum beat right away. Groovebox Advanced ships with a default beat, kick, snare, hi-hat, clap, so as soon as you send it the clock, it starts playing. No setup required. There's also a reset input next to the clock. If you send a rising edge there, the sequencer jumps back to step 1. Useful if you want to sync it with other sequences or reset at the start of a song section. Before we go further, I should mention the inputs and outputs along the bottom and side of the module. There are 6 CV inputs labeled CV1 through CV6. These are general-purpose inputs. You can bring external modulation, pitch signals, or any control voltage into your patches through these. We'll see how they show up inside patches a bit later. And there are 8 audio outputs. By default, tracks are routed to outputs 1 and 2, but you can route tracks to any of the 8 outputs from inside the patch editor. The first thing you see when you look at the display is the tracks view. It looks like a mixer console. Each track gets a vertical channel strip, and you can have up to 16 of them. Each channel strip shows the track number at the top, a little sample browser button for loading samples, a volume fader, a pan knob, and a mute button. To select a track, click on its header area at the top of the strip. You'll see it get highlighted. Once a track is selected, the step buttons down below the display will show you which steps that track is assigned to. If you double-click a track header, it opens that track's patch for editing. We'll get into patch editing in the next chapter. See that little button on each channel strip labeled SMP? That's the sample browser shortcut. Click it, and you get a file browser where you can load a WAV file directly into the track's trig sample module. It's a convenience feature. You could also open the track's patch, find the trig sample module, and change the sample from there. But this is faster for the common case where you just want to swap out a sample. You can also drag and drop an audio file from your computer onto a track. Volume, pan, and mute controls are pretty straightforward. Drag the volume fader up and down. It goes from 0, which is silent, up to 1, which is unity gain. Volume changes are smoothly interpreted, so you won't get any clicks when you move the fader. The pan knob sets the stereo position. Center means equal signal to outputs 1 and 2. Turn it left, and more signal goes to output 1. Turn it right, and more goes to output 2. The mute button does what you'd expect. Click it to mute, click again to unmute. And just like volume, muted tracks fade to silence smoothly rather than cutting abruptly. So you can use mute as a performance tool without getting nasty pops. Now, let's look at the sequencer. Below the display, you'll see 16 step buttons. If you've used a drum machine before, this will feel familiar. Select a track, then click the step buttons to choose which steps that track plays on. A lit button means the track will trigger on that step. Each track has its own independent step pattern. So you might set up the kick on steps 1, 5, 9, and 13, the hi-hat on every step, and the snare on 5 and 13. During playback, the sequencer advances through the steps and triggers whichever tracks are active on each one. Above the step buttons, you've got 16 three-position switches. These control ratcheting for each step. Down position is normal playback, 1 trigger per step. Center is 2 triggers per step, evenly spaced within the step's time window. In the up position, you get 4 triggers per step. The key thing is that ratcheting subdivides the clock period, so the extra triggers fit within the same amount of time as one normal trigger. It doesn't slow anything down. This is great for hi-hat rolls, snare fills, that kind of thing. The sequencer actually has 64 steps, not just 16. You view them 16 at a time across 4 pages. Use the page knob on the panel to switch between them. Page 1 is steps 1 through 16, page 2 is steps 17 through 32, and so on, up to page 4, which is steps 49 through 64. There are also copy page and paste page buttons. So if you've got a great 16-step pattern on page 1 and you want to duplicate it to page 2, just navigate to page 1, press the copy button, then go to page 2 and press the paste button. It copies everything: step assignments, ratchet values, velocity settings, and chance values for that page. Below the mixer strips, there's a row of tiles that open up additional views for the selected track. Let me go through each one. Click the Patterns tile to open the drum pattern library. This is a collection of pre-made 64-step patterns organized into categories: kicks, snares, hi-hats, percussion, and more. Each category gets a tab along the top. The patterns show up in a 3-column grid, and each cell has a little preview so you can see the step pattern before you apply it. To use a pattern, first select a track in the Tracks view, then open Patterns and click the pattern you want. It replaces the track's current step assignments across all 64 steps. And if you want to add your own patterns, the library loads from a JSON file. Please refer to the written documentation on specifics. Each track in Groovebox Advanced has its own modular patch, a little signal chain of modules wired together that defines how that track sounds. The patch tile opens the patch editor for whichever track you have selected. We'll go into full detail on the patch editor in the next chapter, but that's where you build and tweak your sounds. Click the velocity tile, and you get the velocity editor. The display shows a 2x2 grid, 1 quadrant for each of the 4 pages. Each quadrant has 16 vertical bars, 1 per step, and the height of each bar represents the velocity for that step. Taller means louder. Click and drag the bars to set velocity values. Each track has its own independent velocity, so when you're editing velocity, you're shaping the dynamics for just the selected track. Each quadrant has a small toolbar with 3 options. There's Edit, which enables copy-paste between quadrants; Modify, which lets you adjust or randomize velocity patterns; and Patterns, where you can pick from preset velocity patterns like 4 on the floor, boom bap, disco, and others. These are great starting points that you can then tweak by hand. The chance tile works just like velocity, but for probability. Same 2x2 layout, same bar interface. Each bar represents the probability that the step will trigger. A value of 1.0 means it always triggers. zero point 0.5 means it triggers half the time. 0.0 means never. Click and drag to paint probability values across steps. There are also preset patterns here, alternating, syncopated gaits, phrase drift, swing patterns. These are a quick way to add controlled randomness to a beat without it sounding totally chaotic. Alright, this is where Groovebox Advanced really opens up. Each track contains its own modular patch. You build sounds by connecting internal modules together. Oscillators, filters, samplers, effects, just like you would in a normal VCV Rack patch, but everything lives inside the Groovebox. Double-click a track header in the Tracks view to open that track's patch. Alternatively, select a track and click on the patch tile. The editor has two areas. On the left is the patch canvas, where your modules and cables live. On the right is either the module browser for adding new modules, or when a module is selected, the parameter panel is displayed instead for tweaking a selected module. You can pan around the canvas by clicking and dragging on an empty area and use Ctrl plus scroll wheel to zoom in and out. The module browser sits on the right side. In its default sidebar mode, it shows a vertical list with each module's name, a short description, and a drag handle. Just drag a module from the list onto the canvas to add it. There's also an expanded mode. Click the toggle arrow at the top left of the browser, and it opens into a full pane view organized by category. Click a module name to add it to the canvas, and the browser collapses back to the sidebar. And there's a search box at the top of the browser. Type in there to filter modules by name or description. To remove a module, select it on the canvas and press Delete. Or right-click on the module and select Delete from the context menu. Patch modules together just like you would in VCV Rack. To edit a module's parameters, click to select it. When it's selected, its parameters show up in the panel on the right, replacing the module browser. You adjust knobs by clicking and dragging vertically. Depending on the module, you'll see things like frequency, resonance, waveform selection, attack and decay times, and so on. Hit the back button at the top of the display to go back. You can also click on an empty area of the canvas as a shortcut. Let me walk through a few example patches to give you an idea of what's possible. The default track template is dead simple. Step trig goes to trig sample, goes to output. Step trig fires a trigger pulse when the sequencer hits a step assigned to this track. Trig sample plays a sample when it gets triggered, and output sends the audio out. That's your basic sample playback chain. Here's a patch which uses a triggered random output to modulate the pitch of a snare sample. Here's another patch which applies a reverb to a kick drum. So far, we've been looking at individual tracks. But Groovebox Advanced also has global-level features, 2 global patches, and a scripting system that operate at a higher level than individual tracks. Click the Sequencer Control button to open the Sequencer Control patch. This patch runs before everything else each audio cycle. Think of it as a pre-processing stage for the sequencer itself. If you were wondering if the Groovebox Advanced supports different sequencer playback directions, such as forward, backward, and pendulum, the answer is not directly. Instead, you would modify the sequencer control patch to tune in the behavior that you want. The default template comes preloaded with 3 modules chained together: sequencer in, counter, and sequencer control. Sequencer in passes the external clock and reset signals into the patch. Counter counts clock pulses and outputs the current count as a voltage, and sequencer control receives that count and uses it to set the sequencer's step position. Click the Effects button to open the Effects patch. This is where you can add effects that process the combined output of all your tracks. The patch comes with two default modules: Effects In, which receives the 8-channel mix from all tracks, and Effects Out, which sends the processed audio to the module's outputs. To add effects, just place any effect modules, reverb, delay, distortion, whatever you want, between Effects In and Effects Out. Click the Script tile in the Tracks view to open the script editor. This is where you can automate changes over time, synchronized to the clock. A script is basically a list of instructions that execute one at a time in order. When the script hits a wait instruction, it pauses for a specified number of clock beats before continuing. When it reaches the end, it loops back to the beginning. Simple as that. Let me run through what you can do. Wait pauses for N beats. Mute and unmute do what you'd expect. Mute or unmute a specific track. Set volume sets a track's volume to a specific value between 0 and 1. Set pan sets the pan position, where 0.5 is center. Set step lets you turn a specific step on or off for a specific track. Load scene loads a saved scene snapshot, which we'll talk about in a minute. And set variable sets a script variable that can be read by modules inside your patches. The script editor has two panes. On the left is the list of instructions in order. Click one to select it. On the right is the detail panel, where you edit the selected instructions parameters. The toolbar on the bottom has controls to start or stop the script. Also included are buttons to insert a new instruction after the current one, delete the selected instruction, and move the instruction up or down in the script. On the right side of the toolbar, you've buttons for importing and exporting scripts. I want to highlight the set variable instruction because it's particularly powerful. It writes a float value to one of 16 variable slots, numbered 0 through 15. Inside any track's patch, you can add a script variable module and select a specific slot. That module then outputs the current value of that variable as a voltage, so your script can communicate with your track patches. For example, you could use set variable to gradually change a filter cutoff value over time. Inside the track, a script variable module reads that value and feeds it to a filter. Now your script is controlling the sound design, not just the arrangement. Scene snapshots capture your performance state so you can recall it later. Specifically, all track-related information, excluding internal patch states, are included in a snapshot. There are 16 scene snapshot slots available. The workflow here is pretty natural. Set up different variations of your beat and save each one to a different scene slot. Maybe slot 1 is your intro with just the kick. Slot 2 adds the hi-hats and snare. Slot 3 is the full beat with all the percussion. Slot 4 is a breakdown. During a performance, you can switch between them manually with a single click via the context menu. Or, and this is where it gets really interesting, you can use the load scene script instruction to switch between scenes automatically as part of an arrangement. So you write a script that loads scene 1, waits 32 beats, loads scene 2, waits 32 beats, loads scene 3, and so on. Now you've got an automated looping arrangement built entirely inside the Groovebox. Oh, one more thing. You can also load scene snapshots using MIDI. In fact, MIDI is the last topic for today. Groovebox Advanced accepts MIDI input for controlling the mixer, mutes, pans, and loading snapshots. This is great if you want hands-on control with a physical MIDI controller. Right-click the module and look for the MIDI input submenu. You'll see a list of available MIDI drivers and devices connected to your system. Select the one you want to use. The default MIDI mapping is set up for the Novation Launch Control XL using Factory Template 1. It maps to 8 tracks. If you're using a different controller, no problem. The MIDI mapping is defined in a JSON file which you can change to your specific mapping needs. That covers the major features of Groovebox Advanced. We went through the tracks view, the mixer, the 64-step sequencer with ratcheting and step states, the pattern library, velocity and chance editors, the patch editor where you build your sounds, sequencer control, global effects, scripting, scene snapshots, and MIDI support. We didn't cover every single module because there are over 60 of them. I'll try to cover some of the more interesting ones in a separate video. If you have questions, drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.